Let me create one more object. So in this I'm going to make a student B. I'm going to change some values. Maybe different marks. Okay. As we know, this is very pretty clear, like how this value is be printed. So just for our understanding, the plus is a concatenation operator here. So yes, this is the student A total. Okay, get a different values because they have a different marks to say. Okay, now I'm going to do one thing because JavaScript also allows us to change the context of the given object. For example, the student A total actually refers this particular object or property, which is in turn a function which has a dependency of this keyword actually referring from the place where the student A object located and the underlying array students. Same is the case for student B. So this will be referring the student B. So underlying subject's value could be calculated. I'm going to do one simple thing here. I'm going to create a new object, say total something, total new. So in the student B object, there is a total object exist. Remember, it's an object this time. I'm going to bind the context of student A. Mean the total property, in this case total, will have a context of student A, mean this will be actually at this point will be referring the student A. So I'm just interchanging the context. I mean, instead of using the context of student B, it is going to use the context of student A to calculate the total. So this would be referring of the student B. Within that there is a property called total, which is in turn a function, but the function has a keyword this. So at this point this will be referring the student A because I am changing the context of the given object. Now let's print. So total because the student B total function being used, but to use a different context. Let's clear the console. Let's run it. We see that the total student B now calculates the total of the student A because the context got changed. So I bind a different context for the given property so that this word could be interchanged. So JavaScript allows us to change the context of the given object of whatever object we prefer. So this keyword now would be pointing the student A arrays, or in this case depending on subject, so it will be pointing this one. So this way we can put the functions into use, change the context the way we want, create, construct an object with the complex data types. For example, in this case, student name and last name being a string and roll number being a number, subject being an array, and that array in turn has a set of objects, and also it has one of a property called total, which in turn a function. So it's we constructed a complex JavaScript object which consists various data types. And also we saw a simple example on how we can interchange the context of the given object. So I can play around with that. These are all the things probably will be here and there will be using in React.js. So I have one example left so that we can straight away get into the React.js. Let's see that into the next section. What we have seen till now is how to create an object, an array, and how to use the function in JavaScript. Okay, now I have one thing left. Maybe I'm just going back to the array again. Just see. Simple array. So array, see, we have already seen creating a new array by making a copy of it, and a couple of examples we have seen it. One example also I'd like to see. Of course, I'm going to assume you know certain basic syntaxes such as if the conditional statements or maybe array, conventional array statements. So I'm not going to cover it at this point, but I'm going to cover one iterating technique, maybe which will be used as iterator in the subsequent React.js examples. I'm going to talk about array map. So students mark is being an array, so I can use the map function. The JavaScript array map, which is a function, so it maps that particular function on each occurrence of the or occurrence value of the given array. For example, map is a function, so which in turns has the value and the index. So value mean the individual objects. Okay. Okay, to more clearly have to write okay. So maps this particular function on each values. So for example, I'm going to do return statement and each value I'm going to multiply by 10. The keyword return was a mistake. Okay, so now okay, it's going to prepare me a new array, for example. So I'm not going to modify anything, so okay, let's print that value. Let me create this one. If you see this, I get a new array with the values as mapped. For example, this function will be mapped to each occurrence value of this particular given array. So student mark map mean this particular function will get mapped to each value of this array, and it produces a new array. It one way it also internally iterates because on each value being taken and multiplied and produces. So it also produces a new array, and of course with the function mapped on each value of the given array. So student mark is an array, and within that the function called, of course usually the function will be the object and the index. Index also we know that 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, this function can be slightly modified in such a way. For example, in function in ES6, being in ES6, I can skip the function keyword. Instead, I can use the fat arrow in order to have this thing done. So, see that I just remove the function keyword. Instead of that, I am using a fat arrow to denote the function block. So, is there any change happened? Fine. So I'll be using fat arrow technique in order to denote function quite often going ahead. Of course, remember map expect a function, so I can still rewrite it. So, see, I'm just going to I declared this function separately, and the function is a kind of an object because this function I've written. The same can also be written. Both are same. So a function can be written in this way with the keyword function and the name of the function and the parameter it takes and the value it's going to do. Or a function can also be written in this way with the fat arrow, the parameter. So any kind of a comfortable syntax you can use. I prefer using this syntax, so I'm just going to, maybe I'll comment it. Okay, so instead of slightly complicating it, we can simply call this particular function object. So each occurrence of this particular array, being the values, will be mapped to this function. So, and the value will be multiplied by 10 and a new array will be produced. Remove and have it run, we get the values. So these are all the ways we can represent a function, or we can create a new array. Of course, I have created a new array using map function because if each occurrence of an array would require to be modified, we can use the map function and produce a new array with the modified values. And it also helped us to use the function as a parameter here. So in this case, the function I have written in this format. I use a fat arrow technique in order to denote a function. Of course, it's exact same equivalent of same, but of course the fat arrow has a better benefit, or maybe a benefit of accessing the context without worrying about this keyword. We will see those usage going ahead in the subsequent examples as we proceed. So these are all the basics I wanted to cover before getting into React.js. I have only one example though. Of course, the modern class and function a way of representing the JavaScript. So that one simple technique I'll explain, then I'll straight away get into the React.js application development. Welcome. As part of React.js application development, we are learning few basics of JavaScript. I am going to talk a very tiny little bit of the class-based representation of ES6. ES6 allows us to create a class-like structure in order to produce objects in JavaScript. So as we know in high-level programming like Java, the C#, we can create class and underlying objects, I mean functions within that. But there is a little bit difference, and of course, which we may need to know. So that's the reason I'm talking about this. So creating a class in ES6, a class keyword, and the name of your class. Okay, I'm going to get class A because probably I'll add few more classes. So this is the way we create a class. A class will have a function constructor which will be the very first function whenever this class is accessed or accessed as an object. So this is a keyword for constructor. So this function will be first executed whenever this class is initialized. Okay. And of course the functions function can be declared in this way. So a function, as we know, I'm skipping the keyword function if you notice that. So the name of the function and the within the curly brace there, statements of the function will be placed. So this is a simple way of creating a class. This is one of the object. Okay, if you want some object, for example, the class would require a argument in order to say it's going to take a first name argument, and this is going to take a last name argument. How I can put into use? So I'm going to put the console statement instead of return. So, okay, now the first name and the last name required to be concatenated in order to produce few issues here. The first name, the scope of this first name, the object which resides within the constructor, so this particular function might not have access to it. We'll see the example. Let me first create an object. So the object name is maybe a constant m my class A, my A, something like that. You can use a new keyword in order to initialize it. Remember, the constructor expects an argument, so whatever the argument it expects, we'll have to supply, otherwise undefined error possible. Say something. Now I can access the underlying inner functions of the given class this way. My A with the dot notation, get full name, and of course it also expects an argument. I'm just passing that value. Okay, now let me run this example. I end up probably I'm getting an error, I'm not getting an output. Obvious reason is the scope of this first name which I supplied through the constructor. In JavaScript, if you have an object which is private to the given class, you need to use a keyword this. So I'm just going to introduce an object called first name and map the value which is coming from this argument. So remember, this keyword makes this particular object global to the given class. So now this first name, so this first name value will be mapped to this, and now I can call the first name in this way. Okay, Let's try. We get an output. So in JavaScript class, I can use the keyword this and use the property name or maybe a variable name in order to make a global access of the given object within the class. So the first name initially it was a function, a constructor argument which will be available within the constructor function only. So I had to make it a global so that the get full name can also access the first name. So I use this first name equal and this value I am happy. So in order to create a global object, we can create this keyword within the class to make it available for the rest of the function to access. Okay, this is a simple one. Maybe I'll probably write a couple of easy. So remember, we cannot declare uh, objects in this way. So let first name so and so. No, you're not allowed to do it. So this particular way of creating an object could be anywhere, so that the moment this and the object name is found, that particular object will be available for the given the rest of the function to access. Okay, so in fact, declaring it within the constructor is the right place because the object will be readily available because the constructor is the very first function which is getting accessed whenever the class gets initialized. Initializing that or creating your object anywhere other than constructor might not be a preferred idea because the object, the dependency of other functions on that particular object sometime would have been executed before. We will see those trivial scenarios as we progress. So this is a simple way of creating a class and underlying function. Okay, let me do a couple of things. Why this error is coming in? So as we know, constructor is the first one. A function declaration. So if I so this function can access them. That's it. So if the previous example, since it expected a constructor with the argument which came inside, might be confusing. So in order to declare an object within the class, we are using the this keyword prefix, and and so that that particular global object, the object will become global, so that the rest of the function can access them. So this time the constructor is empty, so okay. Let's see the output. Okay. No, the output is coming in. Okay. Since we have seen the class-based approach, let's see the inheritance also, because uh, in a framework-based application development, we will inherit the classes which the part of the framework. We'll be using it quite extensively, of course, in React.js. So for this example, I'll also create another class, my class B. So this particular constructor, assuming it expect caption, something, it's just a string kind of thing. Okay. Now, sorry, if I extend it, I am trying to inherit B. The class A extends my class B, but there are a couple of error already been reported. Obvious reason, the inherited class, of course, has the constructor mismatch kind of stuff, because the my class B has a constructor which expects an argument. So I'll also put a statement so that we can verify. Okay. The first thing, since inherited, so we'll have to make sure and the constructor also matches, and also we need to superimpose the reason is the inherited the class which also executes the class which actually been added, which are assuming this is a child class, this is a parent class. So the parent class constructor is first executed. Whatever the statements being given within the constructor will get executed because of the super function or superimposition. So what it will make sure, it will execute this line first and then go ahead with these lines. Okay, so before that, let's modify a few things. So the caption has to be global so that the other function can access it. So we are making the caption as a global object, and so that the value coming from the constructor will be available for this. So I'm going to make sure this dot. So now the inherited value will also get added to this one. So what the value we will get, first we'll know. Let me clear the console. Okay, I think couple of the reason I'm not supplying the caption here, so I'm going to say Mr. So let's clear the console one more time, because the constructor at this point expect a value. Let's run this thing. So what exactly, if we see the sequence, the inherited the class, which is in this case my class A, and my class B, which is a parent class, first execute. So the constructor work because of the super keyword. So the superimposition makes sure the parent class executed first, and if at all any changes happen, it will do it. But in our example, we haven't done any changes. And after printing this line, then it execute this particular constructor statements, and of course trying to access one of function within this class A produces this output. So we have seen a simple example on how we can use inheritance in JavaScript. It's pretty easy. ES6 makes it quite easy. We can create a class-based approach in order to define an object in JavaScript. So with this, we conclude the basics of JavaScript, and so as I said, I'm going to assume you already aware of the conditional or for loop statements, or maybe down the line we will see some example while creating React.js application.